2.5 homework. Number 1, x plus 4 equals 11. Break it apart into 2 equal pieces. Equals 11, and x plus 4 equals negative 11. So subtract 4 from both sides. That's x equals 7. Subtract 4 from this side. X equals negative 15. All right, so those answers are 7 and negative 15. All right, and then we do number 3, and that is 3x minus 2 plus 3 equals 7, and the absolute value has to be by itself, so we subtract 3 from both sides, and we get 3x minus 2 equals 4. And now split them apart. 3x minus 2 equals 4, and 3x minus 2 equals the negative 4. Now we add 2 to both sides. Add 2 to both sides here. We'll do it all at the same time. So we get 3x equals 6, and 3x equals negative 2. And now we divide by 3. So we divide by 3 on everything, and our answer should be x equals 2. 6 over 3 is 2, and negative 2 thirds. So number 1 and number 3. Moving on. Okay, number 5. The x plus 1 is in the absolute value, so it has to be by itself. So we're gonna add 5 to both sides. We still have the 3 times the absolute value equals negative 6, and then now we're going to divide off the 3. And we get the absolute value of x plus 1 equals negative 2. And now we split that apart, and x plus 1 is equal to negative 2, and x plus 1 is equal to 2. Now, first of all, this is not possible. Absolute value means that you are a positive distance away. It doesn't mean we can't solve it. Okay, so let's take a look at what happens when we solve this thing. So we're going to subtract 1. Okay, and x equals negative 3, and x equals 1. We substitute negative 3 back in. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 5 is definitely not negative 11. So it doesn't work. All right, we'll take a look at the answer here in a second. Let's do number 7. So 9x cubed minus 18x squared minus 4x plus 8. So anytime you see 4 terms, factor by grouping. So let's take a 9x squared out, and we get x minus 2. And we have a minus sign here, so make sure you take out the minus with it on that third term. So we're going to take out a negative 4, and we have an x minus 2. And these two have to be the same, and they are. So now we're going to factor out the x minus 2's. And if we factor those out, what's left? We have the 9x squared minus 4 equals 0. All right, so now either x minus 2 is equal to 0, or 9x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. And so if we add 2, we get x equals 2. But here we see we have the difference of squares. 3x minus 2 and 3x plus 2. So 3x minus 2 is equal to 0, or 3x plus 2 is equal to 0. So your answer should be 2/3 or negative 2/3. And don't forget that 2. So you have 3 possible answers, which is what the exponent means. That's how many answers you're going to have. Sometimes they'll be imaginary, but this time we have 3 real answers. So as you can see, the answer to number 5 is no solution down here at the bottom. That is totally because of your absolute value cannot be equal to a negative number. So be aware of that. You can still solve it, but it's a no solution type of answer. Okay, let's move on. All right, so number 9. So let's see, we have 4x to the 4th plus 10x cubed. Let's move the 6x squared to the left and move the 15x to the left. So that changes their signs. And now everything has an x. So it looks like there's 4 terms. Let's just try to factor by grouping first. We could factor the x out, and that would be okay. Go ahead and just factor by grouping to start. Okay, as long as you're doing mathematical things, you can't make a mistake. Now, it may lead you down the wrong path, but you can't make a mistake. All right, so let's factor out an x cubed and a 2. And we are left with 2x plus 5. And now here, again, we have a negative leading that third term, so let's factor out a negative 3x. And that gives us a 2x plus 5. And again, these have to be the same, otherwise factor by grouping doesn't work. So now let's factor that out. And so 2x plus 5 is factored out in front, and we're left with 2x cubed minus 3x. And so you see now, you have two things here. 2x plus 5 equals 0, or 2x equals negative 5, divided by the 2. So negative 5 halves is one of the 4 answers. Now, here we have something we can factor some more out of. So let's take an x out of that, and we get a 2x squared minus 3. And, okay, so remember this, you got an x out in front. So again, if x is 0, that whole thing goes to 0. So that's a possibility. So here's an answer, there's an answer. That's 2 of the 4. And now we have 2x squared minus 3 equals 0. So add 3, divide off the 2, and when you take the square root, it gives you a positive and a negative. Square root of 3 over 2, which you need to rationalize. Do it. Stop complaining about it. That's the square root of 6 over 2. Okay, so there's your 4 answers. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Moving on. Well, let's look at the answer here. And as you can see, those are the answers we have. Don't forget that 0 whenever you have an x by itself. All right, let's go on. Number 11. So the tricky part about these is you got to remember everything needs to be on one side if we're solving, okay? So let's move the, let's make this minus 5y to the left. All right, if we factor out a y, remember you're supposed to factor out the smallest exponent, and the smallest exponent is a 1, because 1 is less than 3 halves. So we're going to factor out a y. So if we factor out a y, that means we're really dividing by it. So you have to think about these and just think through it. Everybody can divide. All right, so what's 3 halves minus 1? All right, so let me write it down so you can see it. 3 halves minus 1 is the same thing as 2 over 2. I needed a common denominator to subtract fractions. That's why I did that. And the y's reduce out, leaving just a 5 here. All right, so we have a y on the outside. We have a y to the 1 half. 3 minus 2 is 1. Minus 5 equals 0. And so now you can split these apart. Just like the x being by itself, you have the y by itself. Y equals 0. Or y to the 1 half minus 5 equals 0. So I'm going to rewrite this part here. I'm going to do the square root of y minus 5 equals 0. Because 1 half is the square root. Square root of y equals positive 5. Move the 5 over. Now if I square both sides, y equals 25. Okay? So we have 0 as an answer and 25 as an answer. And there's the answer, 0 and 25. Moving on. Okay. Whenever you have a square root by itself, let's square both sides. So we are going to square both sides there. And we're going to get 7 minus 5x equals 64. Make sure you square it. Don't multiply it. So now we subtract 7 and we get negative 5x. Please do not forget the negative attached to the 5. And that equals 57. Divide off the negative 5. And you get x equals a negative 57 fifths. Or negative 11 and 2 fifths. Let's see what the book says. So again, the book is inconsistent, but we're not graphing at this point, so it's okay. But if you needed to graph it, you would want to look at what that is. All right. 15. Again, you got to get, just like your absolute values, you got to get your radicals by themselves. So let's subtract 4. And we get the cubed root of 1 minus 5t equals negative 4. And let's cube both sides. And that'll be 1 minus 5t equals negative cubed. That means negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. That's going to give me a negative. and that's 64. 4 cubed is 64. Learn it. Okay? And now we're going to subtract the 1, and we get, again, don't forget the negative. That's a negative 5t, or the subtraction sign becomes a negative, and this is negative 65. Divide off the negative 5, and t equals, what is that? Positive 65 over 5. 13 would be the answer. Okay? And there's the answer, 13. Number 17. Again, move everything over. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. And we have the fifth root of 2x squared plus 1 equals 2. Now we are going to take each side to the fifth. And everybody should know that 2 to the fifth is 32. Memorize it. So subtract 1. Get 2x squared equals 31. Divide off the 2. And x squared equals 31 over 2. You have to take the square root, and you'll have to rationalize. So x equals plus or minus, and that's going to be the square root of 31 over the square root of 2. So you have to rationalize that, and you get plus or minus the square root of 62 over 2. All right, so that's 2 answers. So let's take a look. And those are the same answers we have. Notice they just write it a little bit differently. 19. All right, so now when we square both sides, because we have the radical by itself, you got to square that whole thing. That's a binomial. So on the left, we have 7 minus x. On the right, that's x minus 5 times x minus 5. Ugh. So you distribute that out, or just, if you figured it out, then you just do it. That's x squared minus 10x plus 25. All right, let's put everything on one side. So 0 equals x squared. We're going to add the x and subtract the 7. We'll do it all at once here. So x squared, that's going to be minus 9x, and that's going to be plus 18. Now, let's see if we can factor that. Always, always, always try to factor x and x. And 18 and 1 isn't going to work. 2 and 9 isn't going to work. Hey, how about 3 and 6? 3 times 6 is 18. And when you multiply them together, you have to have a positive. So if you put pluses in here, you're never going to get those to add up to a negative. When you multiply them, they have to add up to 18. When you add them, they have to add up to negative 9. So just a refresher on what you're doing. Okay. Sorry. Destroying this. So these both must be negative because, negative 3 and a negative 6 gives me a negative 9. All right, so now the answer is x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 6 equals 0. So x is either 3 or 6. 2 answers. Let's see what we have in our answer key. Okay, everybody, so why isn't 3 a possibility? So for the test and everything, if you get down to 3 and 6, I'm going to accept that. But when we start graphing, you're going to have to understand if you have a real number or if it's an extraneous solution, which 3 will be an extraneous solution. So let's plug 3 in and see what we get. You have to understand this. All right, I'm not going to require on the test for just solving it, but I will require it when we are graphing. You have to understand what is what. So get used to trying to figure these things out. If I plug 3 in, 7 minus 3 and 3 minus 5, look at what we get. That's the square root of 4, and that's 2. Yes and no, that works. So the square root of 4 is positive or negative 2. So this is not going to work unless you get an absolute answer. And when we start graphing these, this will make a little more sense. But again, if you did this, then you're going to be okay. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to have to square both sides. And when you square both sides, you're going to have a radical in the middle. So let's just show you what happens when we do this. This is just a binomial, okay? So let's draw it out. And do it again here. And that's equal to 121. Okay, now, distribute. What do you get? You get 9 times the 2x minus 3, because a radical times a radical, a square root times a square root is without the square root. And then you do the next one. And we get plus 6. And the problem here is you have 2x minus 3 times the 7 minus x. So you're going to have to figure that one out. And now let's go to this one. This is going to be plus 6. And again, you have the 7 minus x and the 2x minus 3. And then the final one, you have plus 4 and the 7 minus x, because the square roots cancel out. So let's go ahead and look at the basic things first. Let's distribute those. That's 18x minus 27, and this is 28 minus 4x. Let's put those together. 18x minus 4x is going to be 14x, and you have negative 27 plus 28. Okay, that's plus 1. All right. Now, we have inside here, this is going to be 14x and minus 2x squared minus 21 and plus 3x. So what does that come out to be? That's 17x. Now let's put the negative first. Negative 2x squared plus 17x minus 21. And that's all times 6 underneath the radical. All right, and the same thing on here. We have 6 and the exact same thing, the negative 2x squared plus 17x minus 21. Now, so if you had 6z plus 6z, that would be 12z, because the bases are the same, right? The same exponent. Well, these bases are the same and the same exponent. So we can add those together, and that gives us a plus 12. Plus 12, and you have the square root of negative 2x squared plus 17x minus 21, because you have two of those, the 6 and the 6, and they're the exact same radicals. And that equals our 121. All right, so now we're going to move these two to the other side, and we have 12 and the square root, and that equals a negative 14x, and remember, subtracting 14x and a minus 1, so plus 120. Okay, so now what do we got to do? We got to square both sides. So on the left, we get 144, and then what's under the radical, because the radical is now gone. And on the right side, you have to multiply all that out, negative 14x plus 120. All right, so 14 times 14, negative times negative is positive, 196x squared. Okay, and then you have the 14 times 120, and that gives you 1680, and it's a negative 1680x. And then that's going to give you a negative 1680x. And 120 times 120 is 14,400. All right, let me move all this up. All right, let's keep going here. Distribute, we get negative 288x squared, and 17 times 144 is 2,448, and 144, and that's x, by the way. 144 times 21, negative 21, is a negative 3,024, and that equals this side, 196x squared minus 3360x plus 14,400. It's a lot of work, but it shows you that it can be done. So we're going to move everything to the right side. So you're going to have 196 plus the 288, okay, and that's going to give you 484x squared. All right, and then you're going to take and subtract 2448 from 3360, so it's just going to be a bigger negative. So 2448 plus 3360 gives you 5,808x. Those are now gone, and we're going to add the 3,024. That gives us 17,424. So we've worked really hard. Let's just see if we can factor out a 484, because that's a big big number. Let's just see if it works. Well, obviously it works on the first one. 5808 divided by 484 is going to give you 12. And the 17,424 divided by 484 is going to give you 36. And look at that. That factors into x minus 6 squared. So and you still have the 484 out here, but that doesn't mean anything at this point. So x equals 6. Yay, that was just insanely stupid. That'll never be on a test. There's just too many places to make mistakes. All right, let's move on. All right, so this is something that you should be able to do. Let's go ahead and subtract the 4 to the left. And now we have something simple. We got the radical by itself. Let's go ahead and square both sides. And we get x squared minus 8x plus 16. Make sure you do this right. On the right side is 4x minus 19. Pretty simple. Let's move these to the left. So minus 8x minus 4x is minus 12x. And a 16 plus 19 is a 35. So factor. You guys should be stopping this and figuring it out on your own. So x minus 5 and x minus 7. So again, multiply these two together. Negative 5 times negative 7 is a positive 35. And negative 5 plus negative 7 is negative 12. So it does work. X equals 5 or 7. Okay, number 25. Again, get the radical by itself. So I'm actually going to move this over here to make it positive, and I'll add the 2 to the left. So I have x plus 2 equals square root of negative 7x minus 24. It doesn't matter. It'll work out either way you do this, okay? I just like to look at it in a positive fashion. So square both sides, and we get x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals negative 7x minus 24. So these are things that you should be able to do. Expect something like this on the test or the quiz. So let's move everything to the left here. So x squared and a 4x plus 7x is 11x. And a positive 4 plus 24 is 28. And again, always look to see that this is a 1. If a is 1, ax squared plus bx plus c. If a is 1, then all you need are factors of 28. So x and x go here. They're both pluses, so these are going to be pluses. It's the only time you can do that. That's 4 and 7. So x is negative 4 or negative 7. Surprise, surprise, it doesn't work. You plug those in, you're not going to get the same answer. So again, when we're graphing, you got to make sure you know this, all right? If this were ever to be a bonus, I would suggest if you got down to here, you better check them. Because if you don't have this on a bonus question, you're not going to get any credit. All right, moving on. 27. Another ugly problem, but everything is a radical here. So we're going to square both sides and see how bad this really is. On the left, we're going to write this out. 7 minus 2x minus square root of 5 plus x. We've got two of them. 7 minus 2x minus 5 plus x. Just start whittling it away. And on the right, the radical goes away. So what do we have here? Distribute. We get 7 minus 2x. All right. And then you distribute to the last part. That's going to be negative. And what do we have? The 7 minus 2x and the 5 plus x. Okay. And then we distribute this part. And again, this makes a minus. The same thing. 5 plus x and 7 minus 2x. And the last one, a negative times a negative is a positive, and that's 5 plus x. What's that equal? 4 plus 3x. Okay, again, got to put things together. So we're going to put these two together. And you should notice that these two radicals are the same. So it's a minus 1 radical and a minus 1 of the same radical. So that's going to be a minus 2 of those radicals. So let's multiply this out. Distribute everything through. What does this give us? 35 plus 7x minus 10x minus 2x squared. All right, so that's these two together. And now the other things we have, 7 plus 5 is 12. And minus 2x plus x is minus x. All right, now I'm going to move all of this over there. So on the left here, I have negative 2 and the radical. Let's put it in order. Negative 2x squared and minus 3x, the 7x and the 10x there, plus 35 equals 4 and the 12 is 16, and negative x, I'm sorry, we got to do this right. So let's write it out to make sure we do it right. Minus 12 and a plus x. And 4 minus 12 is negative 8, and 3x plus x is 4x. So we should write this as 4x minus 8. Okay, now we have to square both sides. Not too bad on this one. This is a lot easier than that other one. That'll give us a positive 4. And what's under the radical? Negative 2x squared minus 3x plus 35. And this is 16x squared minus 32 minus 64x plus 64. Distribute it and make sure you're doing it right. You could also factor out the 4 and do it, but we'll do that here in a second. All right. I'm going to factor out 16 out of this. And I get x squared minus 4x plus 4. And then on this side, I'm going to divide everything by 4, because I know that'll go away, leaving us at negative 2x squared minus 3x plus 35. You didn't have to do that. You could distribute the 4 and then get everything on one side. You're going to get the same answer either way. So if I divide by 4, that leaves 4 on the top there to be distributed. All right, let's just go ahead and distribute it. 4x squared minus 16x plus 16. All right, now let's move all this up. Put everything together. Let's add 2x squared to the right. Let's add 3x. And let's subtract 35. And we get 0 equals 6x squared minus 13x. And that's minus 19. Okay. So 6 and 19 will give me 13. It does factor. So 6x, I'm going to put 19 and 1 here. Because what's this give me? 19x and 6x. And I'm trying to get a negative 13, so I'll make 19 negative and 1 positive. Now, does that match? Positive times a negative is a negative, and we already did the addition. So we have 6x minus 19 is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0. So x equals 19, 6, or negative 1. And again, you see that the answer is just negative 1. So the 19.6 must not work. That's a no solution for that part. It's an extraneous solution. Again, show me both, and that's good enough. Move on. 29. Okay, not such a bad thing here. We're going to square both sides. You have to be able to do these things. It's a binomial. It's ugly, but get over it and start doing it faster. The best you can, okay? And try not to make an error. So you have 2 of these. And on the right, you just have the 9 plus 4x, because the radical, the square root is gone. Distribute, and you get 11 plus 8x, which is wonderful. But then you have a plus square root of 11 plus 8x. And then you distribute again, and that gives you another plus 1, 11 plus 8x. And you get plus 1 here. All right. The 11 plus 8x plus 1, that's going to be 12 plus 8x. And these two go together because they're identical. Remember, the coefficients, add those together, we get plus 2 square root of 11 plus 8x. Radicals act like variables. If they're the same, you just add or subtract the exponents. All right, we're almost done actually on this problem. So now we're going to subtract 12, and then we're going to subtract 8x to the right. And we get 2 times 11 plus 8x equals negative 3 minus 4x. Okay, now, again, square both sides. On the left, we have 4 times 11 plus 8x. On the right, you're going to have to distribute if you're not really good at this. So that's a 9, and a plus 12x, and a plus 12x, and a plus 16x squared. Sorry, I just realized my AirPods weren't connected, so it won't be such loud tapping at this point. So distribute, and we get 44 plus 32x equals 9 plus, these two go together, 24x plus 16x squared. Let's move all this up and finish this. So we're going to subtract the 44, and we're going to subtract 32x, and rewrite everything in order. So 16x squared. 24 minus 32 is negative 8, and 9 minus 44 is negative 35. All right, so stop this, see if you can figure how this factors. Okay, we should have 4x and 4x and 5 and 7. And we want a negative, so that's 20x, and that's 28. We want a negative, so that means the 28 has to be negative. So that means the 7 is negative and the 5 is positive, which again will give us a negative 35. And that's the factored form. So 4x plus 5 equals 0, and 4x minus 7 equals 0. So x equals negative 5/4 or 7/4. And again, just one possible answer. We don't need to worry about it yet. 31. Okay, this is just going to be kind of like what we've been doing. So if you square both sides, the first radical goes away, and you get what's underneath, and you get 3x minus 5 on the right. And again, now this looks like the other ones. We square both sides. Okay, on the left, you get 4 times x plus 1. The radical is gone. On the right, you have to take it by itself. So that's 9x and minus 30x. 15 and 15 is 30. And plus 25. Oops, squared, 9x squared. Distribute 4x plus 4. And now let's subtract 4x to the right and subtract 4 to the right. 0 equals 9x squared minus 34x minus, oh, that'd be plus 21. Okay, let's see if we can get this to factor. And pause it and think about it first. Okay, so this should be 9x and x, and 3 and 7. So that's going to be 7, that's 27. So 27 and 27 is 34, but you need it to be negative, so they both should be negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So our answer is 9x minus 7 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. Or x is positive 7/9, or 3. And it's just 3 for this one. All right, 33. Square both sides. Now, you try to do this. Stop being lazy, and you do it. Now, if you've been doing this all along, great job. If you've just been following me, this is not helping you. You're going to do poorly on the tests and quizzes, and you're not going to do well. You've got to do this on your own, and then look at it. Try it, and then watch the video if you can't figure it out. All right. What do we have here? 1 plus 4 square root of x. And go ahead and square this so you can see what's happening here. All right, so that's going to be x. That's going to be the square root of x. That's the square root of x. And that's plus 1. These two go together as 2 square root of x. Remember, same radicals, add the coefficients. All right, now what do we have here? 1 plus 4 square root of x equals x plus 2 square root of x plus 1. All right, so the key here is, just like in these other problems, you want to get all your square roots on one side. If you could have a square root on the left and on the right, and only those, that would be great, but that's not what you have. Anytime you have multiple terms, get your square roots on one side and everything else on the other. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 1 to the right, and I'm going to subtract the 2 square root of x to the left. Luckily, those are the same radicals. So we have 2 square root of x equals x. Notice how all that worked out? Now we square both sides, and we get 4x equals x squared. So subtract 4x to the right, factor out an x, and we get x minus 4. So either, don't forget this x is 0 or x is 4. That one wasn't too bad. And we see that both of them will work. 35. Okay, just because you have a high of a 4 exponent, that doesn't mean it's done differently. It's the exact same thing as long as the middle exponent is half of the leading exponent. You treat it identically to a trinomial, how you would normally factor it. So how would we factor it if it was just x squared minus 34x plus 225? Okay, we would do this. 225 factors of 225, figure that out, and see if you can get 34 out of those. And we get 9 and 25. So we add those together, you'll get a negative 34. So they need to be negative, and when you multiply them, that gives you a positive 225. Okay, so the answer should be 9 and 25. Except that's only if it was x squared. So what we really have is this is really an x squared and an x squared. That's how you're going to get x to the fourth. Okay, so you have to take a look at those positions. So you rewrite it as x squared minus 9 and x squared minus 25. And you should notice that's the difference of squares. Sorry, x minus 3, x plus 3, x minus 5, x plus 5. So our answer should be positive negative 3 and positive negative 5. 4 answers. So good job if you got that far. If you've never done something like that, I know you've had it assigned to you before in Algebra 2, but you just probably didn't know what to do. Hopefully this helps. A little more practice. Expect to see something like this at some point in time, all right? Number 37. Okay, so now you have another y to the fourth, but you also see this 1.5. Let's just multiply everything by 10. If we multiply everything by 10, that decimal goes away. So we have 50 y to the fourth minus 70 y squared plus 15 equals 0. Makes it a little bit different, but try to figure this out, okay? So you're going to have y squared and y squared at this point, but factors of 50 and factors of 15. So 1 and 50, 2 and 25, 5 and 10, okay, and then you have 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. So you got to get 70 out of this, all right? 1 and 50 and 1 and 15, that's the closest you're going to get is 65. So we got to try some different things here. So maybe, let's just try 2 and 25 and 3 and 5. So 6, that'd be 10 and 75. That's not going to work either. Let me think through it. Now you think through it and try to figure it out. Okay, so as I'm going through this, I notice you have a plus and a minus here. So these are both going to be negatives because a negative times a negative is a positive, and then you need them to be negative to add it together to give you the negative 7. So when you put all of these possible answers multiplied together, you're going to be adding two negatives together to make a bigger negative, and they just don't work. So we're going to try and do the quadratic formula really quickly, okay? So x equals minus b. We're going to use the top answer here. It'd be 7 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. 7 plus or minus 4 times 5 is 20. And what we have there, 20 times 1.5 is the same thing as 20 times 1 plus the 0.5. That's 20. Half of 20 is 10. So that's 30. So you have in the radical 49 minus 30 all over 10. 7 plus or minus 49 minus 30 is 19 over 10, which explains why we can't factor this. And that would be our answer. And we have two of these. Remember, it's squared. It's y squared minus 7 plus or minus square root of 19 over 10, and y squared minus the same thing, 7 plus or minus square root of 19 over 10. I'm just showing it to you. So you're going to have y squared equals 7 plus or minus square root of 19 over 10. You take the square root of that, right? You're going to get a positive negative. So y equals a positive negative, the square root of 7 plus or minus square root of 19 over 10. You got to multiply by the square root of 10, and you get plus or minus the square root of, you got to multiply that through there. So square root times the square root, the 10 times each of those, 70, plus or minus 10 square root of 19, all over 10. Yep, welcome to pre-calculus. It's ugly, but just do the math. That's all you have to keep saying. Just do the math from one step to the next. Sometimes you can factor, and sometimes you can't. Okay? 39. And again, this is the same thing as what I said. If this exponent is half of the leading exponent, then treat it like you have a trinomial, a normal trinomial. So let's just go ahead and make it a normal trinomial, and then we'll change everything at the end. Okay? First of all, does this factor? Okay, I can see a 9x and a 4x. Factors of 1 are 1. They both have to be negative to give you a, when you add them together, you get negative 13. When you multiply together, it gives you positive 1. So originally, you would have 9x minus 1 equals 0, or 4x minus 1 equals 0. And your answer would be positive 1/9 or positive 1/4. But the issue is this. When you have an x squared, the exponents that were inside your factored form were always half of the leading exponent. So following that same thing, negative 2 is what really goes in that position, because that's half of the leading exponent of negative 4. All right, so it's ugly. It's ugly. Just do the math. It's the same process as you go through everything else. Oops, 4x to the negative 2 minus 1 equals 0. All right, so let's figure this out. Let's add 1 to the right. We'll divide by 9. Now you have x to the negative 2. Isn't that just 1 over x squared and 1 over 9? Well, doesn't that mean that x squared has to be 9 if they're equal? So that means x is positive or negative 3. Same thing over here. Add 1, you get 4x to the negative 2 equals 1. Divide by 4, it's 1/4. X to the negative 2 is 1 over x squared. This means x squared must be equal to the 4 for them to be equal. So x is equal to positive negative 2. So we have 4 answers, and there were 4 necessary. And now we can see we were right. Okay, 41. Again, the exponent is 1/2 of 2/3. Think about it, 1/2 of 2/3. You multiply them, what do you get? 2 over 6, or 1/3, which is what this is. So what are we going to do? We're just going to start off by factoring it like a trinomial, except we're going to put our exponent as the 1/3. It's always the middle term's exponent. Okay, now we got to get a 4 out of this negative 4. All right, so how about 2 and 2? Because it gives us 2, and that gives us 6, right? It has to be positive, so the 6 must be positive, and the 2 is negative. So that means that 2 is positive, gives us a positive 6, and that 2 is negative. And now that's factored, and you just figure it out as 2 separate problems here. So x to the 1/3 plus 2 equals 0. And now you need to get your x's by itself. So 3x to the 1/3 equals 2. X to the 1/3 equals 2/3. And if we cube that, we get rid of the cubed root. And that's x equals 8 over 27. Same thing over here. X to the 1/3 equals negative 2. Cube both sides. Oops. And we get x equals -8. So those two are your answers. And there you go. Okay, 43. Remember to do one little thing at a time. So the leading exponent here is a 1, and that's half of the leading exponent. So treat it the exact same way. Factor it, but put the middle exponent on the factored trinomials, okay? So it's w to the 1/2 and w to the 1/2. So 6 and 20, you got to figure out how those factors go together. So take a second before you write these down. Okay, so we're going to go with 3 and 2. Well, those are the middle ones. And we're going to go with 5 and 4. So 5 here and 4 there. And I'll just write it out for you. That's 8. That's 15. We got to get a positive 7. So 15 is positive, 8 is negative. So that means the 4 is negative and the 5 is positive there. Equals 0. So solve it. 3w to the 1/2 minus 4 equals 0. Or 2w to the 1/2 plus 5 equals 0. So add 4 and divide off the 3. And what we do, we're going to square both sides to get rid of that 1/2. So w is equal to 16/9. And we get 2w to the 1/2 equals -5. W to the 1/2 equals -5/2. And we square both sides here. And we get w equals 25/4. All right, those are our answers. And as we can see, only one of them is going to work, but I'm not worried about that yet. 45. Again, -1/3 is half of -2/3. So we're going to factor it. W to the -1/3, W to the -1/3. Now figure out the factors. All right, so 2 and 1, and 5 and 3. Okay, again, just to write them out for you. That's 3, that's 10. We got to get a -7, so that means 10 must be negative. All right, so that means the 5 is negative and the 3 must be positive. So solve them separately. And w to the -1/3 minus 5 is equal to 0. So subtract the 3 and divide off the 2. Now the problem with this one is not so easy. We're going to raise it to the 3rd power. Okay, and we get still w to the -1 equals -27/8. But w to the -1 is the same thing as 1 over w. And at this point, they don't match. Like, you would need to have a 1 up here for you to say that w is equal to 8. So all you do at this point is you cross multiply. So that's -27w equals 8. So our answer here should be w equals 8 over -27. Doesn't matter if the negative's in the top or bottom. The right side, w to the -1/3 equals 5. I'm going to cube both sides. And again, that's w to the -1 equals 125. So 1 over w is equal to 125 over 1. Cross multiply, and we get 125w equals 1. And w equals 1 over 125. And there you go. And 47. Okay. If we factor a 2 out of the top part there, we can rewrite this as t over t plus 1 squared, minus a 2 times t over t plus 1 to the first minus a equals 0. So notice that this exponent is half of that one. It looks like a trinomial. So if that is ugly to you, substitute. So let's let x equal t over t plus 1. That parentheses, and rewrite it. So x squared minus 2x minus 8. And we'll substitute t over t plus 1 back in when we're done factoring. So that's x and x, and 4 and 2, right? So it needs to be negative 2, so a negative 4 and a positive 2 there. So x minus 4 is equal to 0, and x plus 2 is equal to 0. But now, we say x equals 4, and x equals negative 2. Substitute the t back in. So t over t plus 1 equals 4, and t over t plus 1 equals negative 2. At this point, I would cross multiply. Let me move all this up. So I get a t times 1 and a 4t plus 4. All right, I'm going to subtract t, and I get 0 equals 3t plus 4. Subtract 4, and I get 3t equals negative 4. Divide off the 3, and negative 4/3 is one of the t answers. Over here we have t times 1 is t, and negative 2t minus 2. Don't forget you're distributing through those. So let's add 2t to the left. That'll make it a little bit faster. That's 3t equals, don't forget the minus sign, negative 2, divide off the 3, t equals negative 2/3. So negative 4/3 and negative 2/3. Let's see what the answer is. Amazing. Math works. All right, almost done. 49. Raise both sides to the least common multiple of 3 and 4. Okay, so let's rewrite this as x to the 1/3 and 2 times x to the 1/4. If we raise both of these to a common multiple of 3 and 4, that would be 12. Look what happens. So you multiply when you raise exponents to exponents. 12 times 1/3 is 4. Now, 2 to the 12th, that's a different story. So you have to figure out what 2 to the 12th is. Okay, so we get 4,096 x to the 3rd power. Okay, so we're going to move both of these over. So x to the 4th minus 4,096 x cubed. And now we can factor an x cubed away, and we get x minus 4,096 equals 0. So either x cubed equals 0 or x minus 4,096 is equal to 0. Well, x cubed equals 0 would mean that x is equal to 0. And if we add 4,096, that's also a possibility. Ta-da! All right, and the last problem. Guys, I know these are hard. That's why we took a couple days to do these. Hopefully you're learning something. You're going to need it. All right, so there's 5 parts here. It's really simple. Watch how this is done. Okay, so we're going to raise both sides. Okay, so we're going to raise that to the 3/5 power on both sides. Because 5/3 times 3/5 is 15/15, or just x to the 1st power. And the bottom number is your root, so the 5th root of 32 cubed. And the 3 can be here, or it can be out here. We know the 5th root of 32, or at least you better. That's 2. And you got to cube it, so x is equal to 8. All right, so let's do B. That was part A. Part B is x to the 4/3 equals 16. Now you do it. Raise it to the 3/4. And we get x equals the 4th root of 16 cubed. 4th root of 16 is 2. That's 8. And let's do C. X to the 2/3 equals negative 64. Raise it to the 3/2. And that means you have x equals the square root. That's what the 2 is, the square root of negative 64 cubed. And you can't take the square root of a negative. So those are our answers there. Remember, when you take the 4th root, an even root on part B there, it's still positive or negative. Okay, so now I'm going to move it up and we'll do D and E. Oops, Let's just move this down here for a second. And let me get this where I can touch it here. And that goes there. All right, so let's do D and E. D is x to the 3/4 equals 125. So raise it to the 4/3. And we get x equals the cubed root of 125 to the 4th. Cubed root of 125 is 5. Got to raise that to the 4th power. So 125 times 4 basically is what you're going to get is 400. That'd be 6. Let's see. 5 times 5 is 25. Times 5 is 125. Times 5 is 500. 625. Okay. And E, x to the 3/2. Oops. Equals -27. We're going to raise those to the 2/3. And that's x equals cubed root of -27, which we know. And then we square that. So that's -3 squared is 9. And as you can tell, D is correct. And E, it says no real solutions. You plug 9 in. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 cubed is 27. You don't get a negative unless you put a negative in there. And of course, then you can't take the square root of a -9. So that's why it says no real solutions. But if you got down to that, that is good enough for me at the moment. All right, congratulations, you're all done with that. Let's move on after this.